Hi, I'm indie fantasy author Melinda Kucsera, and in this episode of Fantasy Lore and More, Stephen M. Wallace is joining me to talk about his book, A Meeting of Monsters. And Stephen's a really good friend of mine, so this is going to be a lot of fun. This is going to be a treat. So welcome. Let's talk about A Meeting of Monsters. I'm going to pretend like we haven't already talked about it 85 times and I don't already know a lot
Exactly.
about it,
As though, like, you
and I
aren't
don't already have
responsible.
copies of the book.
As though you aren't responsible for this coming into existence. Um,
Wait, I was responsible for this?
yes, you're
I don't.
responsible for this.
I mean,
Responsible for everything. I blame you for everything.
that's awesome.
Ah,
So when you become a famous author, you need to like win the crown and be like, it's all her fault.
absolutely. Like it'll be in the forward. It'll be in the forward. It's like I blame Melinda Kucsera for all my trials, tribulations, and my riches and fortune. Uh,
I want to be responsible for
all
that.
$7 of it.
I want to be. I want when someday when Oprah brings on like a fantasy author and it's you and they talk about all of that. I want to be in the audience and you'd be like, it's her fault, and I'm like, that's right. That's
Exactly.
what friends do. We
Shine the flashlight, let the
right.
spotlight into the audience and find you.
And I'm gonna say that's what friends do. We make our friends go after the things they really want.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's how friends help each other.
That's
So,
right.
Meeting of Monsters is
Yes.
actually a prequel to the stories that I produced in your anthology in the Magic Series anthology.
Yes.
So, but we
But you
can get
can't get those anymore. Those were like limited edition. They're
yeah,
gone.
they those that exist are all that will ever exist. Um,
But
though
you'll
I
eventually
will be
put those.
re-releasing
Yeah.
those stories in the future, hopefully next year. But we'll see how things play out.
Okay, you have
Um,
to do it next year because then you have to come back and we have to
yes,
reference this
exactly.
interview and see like what was it, the end of the year, the middle of the year, the
Hmm.
when did you get it out?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, A Meeting of Monsters is a story about ostensibly about a where do I start?
You can start with the blurb.
Where's my blurb? I have my blurb some like hidden, written down somewhere.
It
I have
ran
like
away in fear and is shaking in a corner.
exactly. I have a word file with the
Go
not a
for
word
it.
file. A what is it called? What is it
This is
called?
the madness of like this is why we get along as friends because
Hmm.
I'm always like, wait, where is that file? Wait, I have the thing, but it's obviously not right where I need it right this minute because that would be too easy.
Exactly. Um, what is it? Anyway, so I'm just gonna wing it.
Go
Anyway,
for it.
uh, a couple mercenary teams in a fantasy universe are both tasked with accomplishing the same goal. They come into conflict and into friendship as they both seek to rid a mountain valley of a goblin menace. Our story focuses chiefly on Al'rashal, a centaur warrior, and Urkjorman, a minotaur, well, also warrior but with religious leanings. They find in each other a kindred spirit and a bond, which they connect over the course of the story, getting to know each other, getting to know each other's plights, and seeing both each other and themselves in new ways. And this is their story of their first adventure together.
Shall we meet them? You want to go into the excerpt?
Sure. I have. Do um. Let me do that. I had a weird thing on my screen. Anyway, I could read the first chapter
Sure.
of A Meeting of Monsters. Okay. The first chapter of A Meeting of Monsters is called Kill Steal, and hopefully by its conclusion you'll understand why. It's a bit long,
No,
but
go. I love audiobooks, so I'm fine with that.
okay.
Read on.
So, Kill Steal. It wasn't the smell of ash and smoldering wood that aggravated her nostrils. She'd sadly gotten used to that. It was the smell of filth. The creatures were worse than pigs, leaving a trail of waste in their wake. Be it food, goods, or people, goblins used what was immediately valuable and ruined everything else. The footfalls of boots on stone and the rustle of steel links pulled one of her long ears to the left as Harmon approached. Well? Asked the human as he surveyed the wreckage of the small farm. Which way, Al? Al'rashal looked down at him. She supposed Harmon was tall for a human, though he barely came up to her bust. The centaur aimed her spear toward the low hills nestled at the base of the mountains. East, moving fast. The spacing of their hop shows. Oops, yeah, spacing of their hop shows. Then you'd best run them down, cut in Harmon. He puckered his lips to release a series of hisses to draw the attention of Yane. The woman's head snapped around at the sound, ears pointed at Harmon, and eyes widened wonder before narrowing in embarrassment. Come on, kitty, you're up. Yane's feline body bristled, vibrating in discontent as she came up to Harmon and cast aside the shiny bit of metal she was inspecting. What? Al says the goblins are moving fast. Get after them. Kill them if you can. Slow them down if you can't. We'll be after you as soon as we can. Don't be long, or we won't leave anything for Don't be long, or we won't leave anything for you," warned Yane as she bent to the ground. Like all lichen, Yane was comfortable walking upright, but her arms and legs were equal in length, so she ran on all fours. Al watched her friend go, displaying speed and nimbleness in equal measure. Harbin laughed before turning to Al. "You'd best get going, or she'll take your cut." He emphasized this with a sharp slap to the centaur's rump. Al suppressed the urge to rear and the urge to kick Harm in the chest before racing after her friend. Al filled her lungs with the rich scent of leaves changing with the coming of autumn and tried to ignore the acrid odor of their goblin prey. For a moment, she was sorry for Yene. A lichen sense of smell was superior to that of a centaur, so the stench must have been nauseating for her. Stop, called Al, pulling up short. Yene listened, halting her charge by racing up a nearby tree and looking about for signs of danger. What is it? Al aimed her spear forward at a thin rise in the earth before them, which she'd first taken to be a leaf-covered root, but now was certain was a thin rope stretched between the trees. Trap. Yene climbed down the tree and slowly approached the wire as Al turned her gaze on the nearby shrubbery to hunt for ambushers. Yene plucked at the thin rope, shaking the leaves off, then drew a rapier and swept it along the ground past the rope. Beneath the fallen leaves were several broken bits of metal. Looks like they weren't in as big a hurry as we thought, which means they aren't as far ahead as we feared either. Yene swept the bits of metal aside and cut the rope. With a nod to Al, the two continued forward, moving with purpose, not haste. They found more challenges, simple things to slow down pursuers and dangerous things to harm them, from trip lines to fallen logs to broken daggers coated in dung. Removing the impediments was time consuming, but the two took solace in the fact that setting them up would have cost their quarry more. It was not long before Harmon and the others caught up. I thought you people moved quick, grumbled Ord, the older of the two dwarfs, as he approached. We could have gone much faster and left you to fall in a pile of filth and shit, said Yane, but you smell bad enough as it is, so we thought we'd do Harmon a favor. Ord stepped forward with a growl, a hand moving to the blade sheathed on his back. But he was halted by Harmon grasping the blade's handle and pulling the dwarf to a halt. Don't be a bearded baby, said Harmon. If Ord thinks it's stupid to take care of the traps, he can go first and find them for us. The dwarf muttered something beneath his breath, but turned away. Thought so. Harmon gestured for Al and Yane to continue. It made for slow going, the sun crawling from its zenith to but a few hours before setting when they came within sight of the goblins' camp. The camp, such as it was set up beside a broad, slow-moving river that wound from the low hills in the north to the human villages towards the south. The trees nearest the camp's edge had been felled to create low walls that several goblins rested along. Though they were probably supposed to be guards, a trio of fires sat near the riverbank with something cooking over two of them, and several tents of different sizes were arrayed within the perimeter. It's a damn village, growled Ord. Almost, agreed Harmon. No wonder these things have been bad around here lately. Harmon took another moment to assess the situation, rotating his long sword and taking idle swipes at the air as he thought. Leia, Silas, Yane, go right. See if you can reach that hillock to the north without being spotted. Signal when you get there, or get caught. Yane and the elven siblings nodded, swiftly disappearing into the thick foliage. Or, Jorn, Kuthanit, follow the trail down and go south. I don't want any of them making it across the river. Or looked to his son, Jorn, the two sharing a ruthless smile before looking to Kuthanet. The gnome simply nodded, burying his fear and pulling his finely wrought crossbow close to his chest. The three moved down the trail, slipping to the south with nothing but the hint of rustling leaves to mark their passage. Harmon turned to the rest. We wait for the signal and charge. Everyone else set about checking their weapons and armor, and together they waited. Al knew it hadn't been long, but every second that ticked by felt like an hour. While she, Harmon, and the other humans waited, half of their number were probing the edges of the goblin camp. The creatures were small and weak individually, but in numbers they could bring down the mightiest of creatures. All it would take was one goblin to pay attention, to be lucky, and the others would swiftly be overwhelmed. Don't worry, we can break this, said Harmon, as a wiry smile crossed his lips. Al rolled her eyes. She knew it was coming, but it still forced a smile to her lips. The only thing a champion can't break is a promise, finished Al, and the assembled finished Al along with the assembled. Harmon said it on the eve of every battle, and as stupid as it was, it eased a measure of her worries. A sharp whistle, like the cry of a hawk, slid through the air. Harmon smiled. Let's go! Al'rashal had to restrain herself at first. The humans were nothing close to her speed. They began jogging, then running, Harmon staying at her side as they neared the camp. Soon the goblins near the barricades took notice. One of them stood up to cry out alarm. Another raised its spear as though to throw it at the coming mercenaries, and a pair of arrows punched into its head and chest. Other goblins took notice of the commotion, began to grab weapons, and abandon whatever they were doing. A thick fog drifted up the river, swiftly obscuring its banks, just as Ord and Jorn released roars of excitement. The two dwarfs raced from cover, with crossbow bolts sailing past them into the goblin sentries. The two leapt into the barricade and brought their blades down, but Al could see no more as the mist continued to thicken. Now! Ordered Harbin as he pulled himself onto Al's back. The centaur sped up, at last free to sprint, easily outdistancing the others. She cleared the barricade without thought and brought her front hooves down onto a goblin that was racing forward. Al swept her spear to the right, catching a goblin in the side of its head, and sent it crumpling to the ground, neck askew and broken. Another goblin turned to flee, and Al drove her spear into its back. Harbin leapt from her back, using his velocity to turn himself into a human missile, and collided shield first with a trio of the charging creatures. The human rolled to his feet swiftly, beheading one goblin and kicking another back into his allies. From somewhere in the growing fog, Al heard more overlapping roars. But these were not the roars of her companions. There was something else in this encampment, something that made the cowardly goblins wail with excitement and renewed vigor. A spear skidded off the plates of her thick leather armor, and another narrowly missed her face as she stepped aside. She had been surprised by the roars and stopped moving, a foolish mistake for a centaur. Movement is life. She ran, trampling a goblin before her and bolting around the piles of canvas and wood the creatures called tents. She could hear her companions facing the other goblins and was forced to slow as the fog grew thicker. Thankfully, it seemed much a detriment to the goblins as herself. She slowed as she neared another figure. The fog rendered it little more than a silhouette, but she could see that it was well over 5 feet tall and held a broad axe-like weapon in its hands. Nirma carries an axe. Nirma, do you know where the others are? The figure turned, revealing its broad, muscular shoulders, the shining yellow eyes. She raised her spear as it swung, realization flooding her mind even as the words left her lips. Orcs! She could hear shouts of alarm from other members of the mercenary crew, which were challenged by the deep, throaty bellows of the orcs. However, she hadn't any more time to think of her companions. The orc tested his strength against her own, trying to push her back as the halves of their weapons ground against each other. The orc was strong, much stronger than a man, and probably used to overpowering everything around it. But Al'rashal was no mere human. She was a centaur, and there was little that equaled her in strength. She pushed, causing the orc to stumble backward and open his defenses long enough for her to rear and plant both her forehooves in his chest. The orc tumbled to the ground, but rose, seemingly equal parts hurt and enraged. Al was shocked. Such a kick would have broken or cracked the ribs of a human. To the orc was just a challenge to be overcome. She smiled. Come on then, Tuskbrain. Let's see what you've got. The orc smiled, happy, it seemed, to answer the challenge, and roared and charged. The orc hacked at her, axe held in both hands, which she stepped aside and thrust with her spear, punching into the orc's shoulder. It didn't seem to care and swept at her legs, forced to back up to avoid losing a limb. She jabbed at him ceaselessly, but couldn't get a telling strike. A cut here or there, a little blood from his arms or sides, but nothing that would kill the creature, at least not anytime soon. She pushed in when the orc expected her to back away, colliding with him in a tangle of limbs. His axe fell away, but he grasped her spear to stop her from driving into his chest. The orc laughed as he got a hand about her throat. Her lungs burned and nostrils flared as she struggled to draw breath. The orc held on for another minute she would pass out, but she would not give him a minute. She crashed into one of the larger tents, using the orc as a ram. His grip about her throat eased as timber shattered against his back, and Al reared once more, flinging the orc away. The orc crashed to the ground, skidding across the loose earth and coming to a stop. Oop, where am I? Coming to the stop in a heap. Groggily he rose, and Al threw her spear into his chest. The orc looked confused, then gaped down at the weapon protruding from his breast. Good fight, he said, before collapsing with a smile. Al released a sigh of relief that was cut short by the unfamiliar voice. Nice throw. From the mist behind the orc's corpse came another, and she could hear two more coming up behind her. With her spear gone, she was reduced to the daggers she kept on her hips and her hooves. She could hear Harmon somewhere in the darkness, telling the others to rally to him so help would not be fast in coming. Fine. Daggers and hooves it is. She was prepared to charge when she heard something else, the beat of hooves on river rock. Four hoof beats before her. But she was the only centaur, and she had seen no horses or mules in the goblin camp before. Then her eyes caught the silhouette of something gigantic looming in the mists behind the orc before her. A roar like thunder shook the air, and with it the mist parted as though fleeing the primal bellow. Revealed then before her were two mountains of muscle and fur, each easily head and shoulders taller than her, with bronze flesh, iron black horns, and faces that seemed somewhere between bovine and man. Minotaur, she gasped. The orcs, however, seemed just as surprised, with the orc before her only able to mutter a "wah" before the two minotaurs shattered him between them with their weapons. One of the minotaur, the shorter one, with brown fur, pulled her spear from the orc corpse and stomped forward as the orcs fled. The taller of the two, the one with gray fur, chased after the orcs with a snarl. The brown-furred minotaur turned the spear about in his hand as though testing its balance. The 6-foot shaft looked almost frail in his grip, and he drew closer, not so much walking as lumbering forward. It must have been in her imagination, but Al could have sworn the earth trembled as he neared. She found herself stepping back hesitantly and tightening the grip on her daggers, but she doubted they would mean much to the thick slabs of meat the thing called a chest. He was all but naked. A few bands of leather sheathed his left arm, and a skirt of leather strips with brass studs hung from hip to knee. Pterygies, she identified as some part of her mind tried to remain clinical while the rest filled with apprehension. The Minotaur leaned forward, stooping slightly to come eye level with Al, which was disconcerting. She hadn't met anything that had needed to stoop to come eye level with her since she was a child. His eyes were black. No, a deep, deep brown. But you couldn't tell that unless you were close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. Then he spoke, but the words were less like sounds and more like a rumble that she could feel in her breast. This is yours, I believe. She pulled her eyes from the deep pools of his gaze to see the spear offered to her. Yes, she stammered through dry throat before taking it back. The Minotaur lingered, his gaze combing her form, assessing her as she had him. Keep up! Runt! Tore through the air, drawing Al's and the Minotaur's attention to the west. Coming, responded the brown-furred Minotaur as he lumbered after the gray. It took Al'rashal several long moments to stop quivering. Her long ears shifted, untangling the overlapping sounds of battle until she once more found Harmon's voice. That was where the fighting would be thickest. Come on now. Gotta earn your keep. These things aren't going to kill themselves. Harbin was where she'd expected, in the thick of it, practically a blur of steel and limbs as he battled a pair of orcs. Most of the others were there too, as well as many she did not recognize. Most of the others were human, but there was also a Draken with a burning blade and two Minotaur. Al had rarely seen such a diverse collection of beings in such a small area, and for a moment she could do nothing more but stare. Then she noticed Yane wrestling with a pair of goblins as more tried to pile on the young lichen. Al'rashal charged, racing across the ground to her friend to impale one of the goblins and kick the other way. You all right? Yane brushed herself off, bruises already rising on her skin even as the cuts dotting her body stopped bleeding. I'll be fine, thanks. What the hell is going on? I don't know, admitted Al, but we're not going to figure it out until everything with green skin is bleeding out. Yane smiled. We best get to work before the furbacks steal all our kills. The Minotaur alone were reaping a bloody toll, and if the rest of the band was even half as capable, it would be difficult to outdo them. Al nodded. Yes, we can't be outdone by the newcomers. And I think we'll leave it there for the
That was a lot.
moment.
I wasn't ready for it to end, but I never am. I'm like, wait, no more?
Hmm.
Maybe I'll get another excerpt out of you. We'll see.
Well, certainly, I've got the time. Um, but yeah, that's the beginning. That's the beginning of Kill Steal. There's only a little bit left, but I felt like that was a good place to let things dangle. Um, so we have Al'rashal
Cliffhanger.
and her mercenary crew, the champions, off on an adventure, trying to make a little bit of coin. And with
So,
the Alan Yerk stories, I like to seesaw between their point of views. So the first chapter is Al's, the second is Irk's, and it's going to go back and forth like that throughout the book. Once in a while, maybe I'll have guest chapter from one of the other characters, though. In A Meeting of Monsters, it's just Alan Yerk. Whereas in some of the other books, there's one or two chapters from the point of view of another person, to really get an idea of, like, getting ahead of these characters and how they feel and what uh what the world is to them.
right, right. I've got a couple of questions. So,
Hmm.
Al is a centaur, and
Yes.
Urk is a minotaur, kind of.
Yes.
Uh, so like, what challenges does that pose when they're like traveling? Like when so they're done like let's when they come to a town or village or a city, how do they find accommodate like are in this world that you're creating are there accommodations for them? Or do they run into issues with that? Because that
Oh,
could be kind of interesting because
Oh,
because
they run into several issues. It really depends on exactly what kind of area they're in. So a more metropolitan area, an area that's going to have a lot more trade and different peoples coming and going, or areas that are, used to their peoples, are going to have more accommodations. But most places, they're like staying in like barns and things like that. They're lucky if they get a room large enough to fit both of them, and then it's just like we're just gonna throw the bed out and just leave it in the street or something because it's just it's too small for either of us to use in any fashion. Um, Minotaur in particular are
Mhm.
like very antisocial creatures, so there isn't a lot of community with them or about them, so they're exceedingly rare in quote civilized lands. Centaur are very communal creatures, kind of like horses.
Mhm.
um, they move in big tribes and large herds, so the areas around centaur territory are used to accommodating them, um, are used to having spaces large enough for them and areas for them to congregate, and having their buildings and structures tall enough for centaur to enter easily. But once you get away from those areas where they commonly reside, it becomes very much like we'll bring food outside for you if you come to an inn or a restaurant or whatever. But like they can't fit inside because their heads would be through the roofs or be scraping the roof,
Yeah.
um, more like the rafters. Since typically the bottom floors of buildings are going to be very tall to let in more sunlight, but still, it'd just be cramped and difficult and be knocking things over, bull in a china shop and all that kind of thing.
So,
Um,
like, how tall is a minotaur? So, if Al and Urk were standing next to each other, and minotaurs are like upright, they're like
hmm
humanoid, but like minutes, like uh, I can't. My brain froze.
I have
In
their official
too many
heights.
thoughts.
I have their official heights written down somewhere,
Just give us a
in
prox.
my
I'm
thing.
just
But like,
curious.
if Al is like 7 foot and change, um, I actually think she's closer to 8 feet, because it's the trunk of a human on the shoulders of like a Clydesdale,
Hmm.
um, and
Clydesdales are quite tall
yeah,
too.
like she is. That's why, like, there's that line where she's like she hasn't had to look up to anybody since she was a child. Like, even for a minotaur, she's tall. Sorry, even for a centaur, she's tall, right? Like, because it's not like she's a Mustang or something like that. She's a Clydesdale. right? So you put like 4 feet on top of like the 6 foot shoulders or whatever of
Hmm.
a Clydesdale, and that's where she's at. And then um,
Your Google
Urk.
search history must have been interesting while figuring
Mhm.
this out.
Exactly. And Urk is basically head and shoulders above her. Like so like she comes up to like the middle of his like the middle top of his chest. Like he could comfortably lay his head on top of her head while they're standing like when they're standing face to face without like stretching. Um so so yeah, so he has to stoop a little bit to look her in the eyes, and he's the shorter of the two Minotaur in this story. Urk has two brothers. We only meet one of them in the story, and Urk is the the middle child. So there's his older brother Durkon is the other Minotaur here. He's like head and shoulders taller than Urk, and then Urk has a younger brother, which you meet several stories later, which is head and shoulders shorter than Urk, um, and which still makes him like 8 feet tall or something. So it makes him as tall as Al. Um, Actually, I think he's a little shorter than Al, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
So yeah, most buildings made for humans do not fit them well. Some most common places which are made to congregate lots of people are tend to have like 12 foot 15-foot ceilings on their first floor, like manor houses, government
Hmm.
buildings, stuff like that. Most places like that will fit them. When they're traveling by themselves, they set up a basically a pavilion to keep the weather out. So there's giant poles and lots of tarps, and the pavilion will have like a fucking 20-foot ceiling or something. Um,
And like in terms of like furniture, like I don't.
their furniture is mostly utilitarian. Like they don't
Yeah,
like York
they're not
might
gonna
have a
lounge
chair if
around.
he wanted to, but like you just lay in the ground.
Hmm.
They throw it on like blankets and pillows, and stuff like that. They're not really caring about like actual chairs and desks and things like that, particularly given like their proclivities of what they do for a living.
Hmm.
Um, they're not like artisans or scribes or something like that, which where a desk is going to be a very worthwhile investment for them. They're mercenaries, they're warriors, and go from place to place fighting things, and serving the needs of people who can't defend themselves against the difficulties and the challenges of the world.
Mm, that's interesting. And in terms, so like horses, I mean, they're generally was a vegetarian. So is Al as a centaur follow the dietary habits of like the horse, or more like humans who can kind of eat a little of everything?
Yeah, both Al and Yerk are omnivores. Al would have um, a more rounded diet than Yerk, but that's a matter of choice.
Hmm.
They're both omnivorous creatures. Um, though leading towards like leading towards grains and greens and things like that. They have those giant stomachs that act as like compost heaps to break
Mm.
down to break down complex foodstuffs like grains and so on. Like they digest cellulose, etc. But they are omnivorous. um,
That's an
speaking
advantage though
specifically.
in their line of work because they have more things are edible for I guess Alice since it has if she has some of the stomach of a horse than to a regular human.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, it's very easy for them to live off the land, to just like graze through, whether it's grass and fruits or nuts and berries or fish and game. So traveling great distances, their only real limitation is water, and if they can follow rivers or find water sources, then sustaining themselves on whatever they can find is generally fairly easy.
mm,
There's a scene in this book later on where Al, Yidney, Urk, and Durkon are like in a plum grove eating plums, and Al and Yanae are like eating the flesh, and Durgon and Urk are just eating the plums whole. And like somebody like makes a comment like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do the sensible thing and not eat the pits like the cows." Who just Durgon and Urk just crunch the whole thing in their mouths. Um, it's I find it's a cute scene. It's kind of a
That's
an
fun.
an
I like
homage
that sort of
to
thing.
a story one of my science teachers told me about how her cows would go over to the semi-fermented apples on the ground and eat them until they got drunk. So they're just
That's wild.
so they're eating like like eating slightly fermented, slightly rotten plums to get a little buzz going on the eve of a fight at that point in the story,
That's
and it's just
wild.
thought it was
So,
just cute.
how do they act? So since we've brought it up, then they're getting a bit of a buzz. How would how like if did they go to a tavern and have a drink, or is their preferred thing? Let's find some fermenting fruit and get high
They'll
off that.
they'll do whatever, right? But like Al would generally she would like go to a tavern and get a drink, that kind of thing. Whereas like
Is she a pleasant drunk, or is she the one you need to like stay away from? You don't want to make her
no,
mad.
Al No, Al's probably a pleasant drunk. Al is a very warm person internally. So she's the I love you guy when she gets drunk. She's gonna like hug you and like drag you off and like hoist you into the air and dance with you, kind of thing. Centaur are fantastic dancers. Um, uh, just part of their culture. Um, whereas Yerk, if he actually gets drunk, he's like a sleepy drunk. He's just gonna
Ah,
like he's just gonna snooze in the corner and like slowly eat like roast pig or something. Um,
I wonder why Alice dancing on the tables.
exactly. He's like, "What are you?
Where did she get the energy from?
Exactly." But it takes a lot to get them drunk, being given
Yeah.
how large they are, and they drink more for the flavor than for the buzz
Yeah,
of
it would be too
things.
expensive probably to drink enough to
Exactly.
get them actually hammered.
It's like, yeah, I'm going
Um,
to fill this tankard with vodka, and that might do it. And then like just you don't want like a 10-foot tall drunk minotaur stumbling around your town. So
yeah.
generally that's not going to be a thing. And like
They probably wanna keep the good opinion of everyone because 'cause they're looking for jobs, I'm sure. So,
exactly, right? And less human creatures have sort of a reputation of being wilder, less intelligent, and so forth for several reasons.
ah,
Um,
because the
but
goblins?
Yeah, exactly. Like goblins, right? So they're generally called demi-humans by, or just demis by most others. So like, dwarves, elves, humans are all like gnomes are all seen as kind of like the civilized races. And then you've got the centaur, minotaur, and a few others, um, draken, um, lichen are is generally seen as less civilized, more bestial. And there is some truth to that in that like their primal natures are stronger because of like basically the lore of the universe, but
Mhm.
they're just, more prone to listen to their instincts and more prone to value like simple lives and not worry about stuff like building cities, right? They just want to exist and coexist with nature and the land, and they'll defend themselves, and they'll have fun, and like they'll run around in circles to have a good time and all that stuff. But the those creatures, a lot of those creatures, are 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 said to be the creations of the mother of monsters, is one of the gods. Um, and so people have this sort of like leery um feeling about them. It's like all the monstrous things were created by the mother of monsters, so
I see.
we're worried that like there's still a bit of evil, that kind of wildness in their nature that makes them untamed. So people look at minotaur and like centaur and things like that the way people look at like wolves. Like
I
they can
see.
be kind and helpful and friendly, and but there'll always be wolves. They'll never
Yeah.
be tamed, right? You
Mhm.
know,
I
same
mean,
thing with
unless they're
tigers and
dogs.
lions, right? But yeah, like there's a difference, right? It's like like it's like you look at a horse the way you look at a dog, and you look at a centaur the way you look at a wolf. It's like I
Mm.
could be friends with it. It could be kind to it. It could be kind to me, but it'll always be a wild animal, and I'll have
Mhm.
to always remember it's a wild animal. And that's how centaur and minotaur and a lot of these other creatures are looked at, where it's like they're civil, but there's always that wildness in them. Whether that's true or not is debatable from creature to creature and so on and so forth. But that's the general feeling of the populace of the Shattered Sky setting. Um,
I see. So are they always aware of that they are being looked at as less than in when they're in what the other civilized quote unquote
yeah, yeah,
races?
it's a
And
thing
are
that they
they're
it's a thing
always
that they're
trying to like
always
disprove that
yeah, it's
by
a thing that
trying to
they're always
act more human?
kind of like always a part of their psyche of like people are going to look at me this way or think of me this way or what have you. And it's just very like sort of the casual racism of people being different, like you know like in the first chapter, Harmon kind of like does like a whistle to Yune to get her attention the way he would a cat, or he slaps Al on the rump to get her to run like he would a horse, right? Because some part of him still thinks of them as like a cat and a horse and not as people, but he does see them as people as well, right? It's a complex. It's layers of interaction, right?
Mhm.
Like when Ord is like complaining and Harmon steps in, he's like basically stop being an a-hole, right? Like they're doing their job, you know stop being a jerk, right? But how close, how what level of equality he really views them as is questionable. It's a question that comes up in the story actually, where
Mm.
like there's some interactions between Al and Yerk and Harmon and the other mercenary leader, who's also a human. Um, and like whether or not like whether they see their demi-humans as equals or as like, I don't want to say servants, but the way like your average adult views like a preteen, like you're a person but you're not an equal kind of thing.
Mhm.
um
How do Al and Irk feel about that? Do they are they I guess they're always aware on some level that they're being looked at as less than by people, even people that they are friendly with.
mhm
Maybe, and and that person may not always be consciously aware of their bias.
mhm
Um, do they each react differently to that, or do they just not care? It's
Well, they basically like they have their own coping mechanisms. But there's also the certain level of like, you know, this is how their life has always been. So some part of them is like, this is just the way the world works, and then
Mhm.
some part of them is like, this isn't the way the world should work, right?
Mhm.
And there's a give and take between like how much disrespect do I accept for the benefit of like operating in this world without difficulty, right? Like, you know, you know, I, I, uh, like I am not a woman, right? But I imagine that as a woman, you've had to make the calculation a couple times. Like, all right, do I do I assert myself and deal with being a bitch, or do I let this one slide? Do I want
Mm.
this fight, right? Uh, I'm a black man in America. I'm a minority, so like sometimes I have to make the calculation. Like, do I get to be angry today, or do I have to let this one slide because like whatever ramifications will occur as a result of somebody looking at me as that kind of person, right? And that's sort of where all the demi creatures live, right? Generally,
Mhm.
with a sliding scale based on exactly which culture they're interacting with at any given point in time. Like, this comes up in a later story, but like there's a kind of an animosity, like a sort of a racial animosity between Minotaur and and gnomes because of some conflicts that have happened in the past with Minotaur like attacking them and so forth for being small frail creatures. And then it kind of comes to a head when Yurk and Al have to protect a bunch of gnomes as one of their jobs, right? And like these kind of get shit for it for like just being what they are. And Yurk's like, I'm not that guy. Like, I don't know whatever happened to your people in the past, but that wasn't me, right? You're projecting your issues elsewhere. And he gets a little like back, but that in those exact words, and Yerk isn't quite that eloquent in the common tongue.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like in those kind of back and forths he gets into with the gnome elder basically, because they're both at that point they're both holy men, and they're kind of talking in regards in relation to like religion and faith and stuff like that, and they have um, not the same faith, but their mythologies interconnect.
I
Um,
see.
there's like the god that Yerk worships is the husband of the god that created the Minotaur, not sorry, that created the gnomes. So there's this interplay between them of like what that relationship is like and all this other stuff and what it means for them as worshippers of those deities. But that's in the fourth story. Um,
Which is not out yet. Nudge,
it was
nudge.
it was it was released in your anthology, and now it's in the vault, and it will be re-released hopefully sometime next year. Once I finish the third story, which I'm working on now, very slowly, not as
How
much as I
much?
should.
How far into the third story are you?
I'm probably 40% into the third story. Um, but there's a big asterisk there because there's a chance I'll do a hard revision on how it all comes together. It's I have the current stories are all hit very specific important points in the lives of Alan Yerk. So like this story, A Meeting of Monsters, is when they first meet and how they first get together and decide to start to adventure together, right? And then the second story is basically them having a lover's quarrel. And then the third story is them entering into this really important contract with uh with a malevolent being known as the Baron of Wings. And
Yes.
then the fifth story is the end of that contract, and the sixth story is about their
You skipped the
the
fourth one.
fallout. Huh?
You skipped the fourth one.
Did I skip the fourth one?
Yeah, because the third one is they take the contract.
Right. The fourth one is what it's like to fulfill the contract.
Ah,
What the adventure, what it's like to, what kind of stories, what kind of adventures they go through to fulfill the contract. And then the fifth story is when the contract is fulfilled, um, or when they come to the conclusion of the contract, I should say. Fulfilled or not is kind of a up in the air. And then the sixth story is the fallout from the fifth story. Is all I can say without giving too much away. Um, yeah, but meeting of monsters is when they first get together, when they first meet each other.
hmm.
Both they both essentially the muscle for the mercenary team that they're a part of, because they're so much more powerful than humans and elves and dwarves and so on and so forth. Um, so like in on Urk's team, it's Urk and Durkon, the two Minotaur, right? And then in Al's team, it's Al and Yene, because Linne is a like she's basically a were creature, um, like lycanthrope, and but she's part cat instead of part wolf. So she's got heightened senses. She heals really fast. She heals really fast. She's fast and nimble. All that good stuff. And then Al is just a really skilled warrior. She's super fast because she's a horse. She's incredibly strong. Um, and so that's why when she like kicks the orc in the chest, she's like, I'm surprised he's still alive. It's like people will tell you like you get kicked by a horse, you're lucky to live. Um, though the forelegs tend to be used more in like a kind of a slashing, kicking motion than a thrust. Behind legs, though, now they will
Yeah.
put you in the dirt. Um, And then like so if you have like a Clydesdale coming down on you, it's going to be a bad day for people.
Yeah.
Um,
So all right. So it sounds like each of the different races was created by a different god. Is that you said there's the god that created the gnomes. There was the god that created the centaurs and the minotaurs and some others. How many gods are there, and which races did they create, and why did they create them?
um, there are a bunch of gods, just like around nine. There's like major deities and lesser deities and so on and so forth. And some of the gods created a lot of races. Like the Mistress of Monsters is the god of like change and shape shifting and stuff like that. So she's created a whole bunch of stuff, and it's theorized that she created a whole bunch more. 'Cause she's also the god of like lust and seduction. So she'll like turn into the spouses of other gods and then sleep with them and conceive other things. So there's like debate about like which races were actually created by which gods. There's like, well, you this race is kind of dark there, right? But so there's like the god of magic is basically a nine-headed dragon, and he made the dragons, and from the dragons came the draken, which are like dragon people. Um, the god of nature, the second god of nature, created the gnomes to explore the world and to and created the gnomes and the fey creatures and stuff like that. The original god of nature, I think, just created nature itself and kind of created undead. When they died, they were murdered, but as a god of life, they couldn't stay dead. And when they came back to life, it created undeath. Um,
Zombies.
yeah, exactly. Zombies, vampires, um, liches, all those things are because the god of nature, the god of life,
Who
um,
killed? Who
the god
killed
of
them?
assassins, the god of assassins and tyranny, which is also the god of humanity. Humans,
That's right on the nose.
yeah, humans are the product of the god of assassins, kings, tyranny, and I think not agriculture, like industry. So
Yeah.
the god of like industry and assassins and kings and murder, and that's where humans come from. Um, and I said the goddess of monsters. She made the centaur, the minotaur, the elatar, which are basically like fish people. Um, and then the gods together, sleeping with each other, and so on and so forth, made other like combination races. Um, the,
Why did they create people? Like their respective the creatures that they created or peoples that they created. Why did they create them? They were
well,
just
some of
bored.
them, yeah,
They
some of them are
needed
just possessed
servants.
by a desire to create like the goddess of transformation and the gods and god of nature just have a desire to create, right? And then some just kind of like came about by happenstance, like they were doing things and a species kind of generated from their actions. The god of magic um was basically lonely, so he created dragons. um
Aw. But at least
well
he
like
wasn't bored.
Yeah, well, so the god of dragons is the child of the gods of the sun and the moon. The god of the sun is a woman. The god of the moon is a man. He's the god of justice and death. And she's the god of like sun, and she became the god of life when the nature god died. She took that domain when her son died. Um, and so he's the god of magic, but like he's never really felt like accepted by his parents. Um, and it was very very different from everybody else and kind of you know went his own way. So he created creatures invested with magic and power like himself, and that became the dragons. And then the dragons, again, kind of being lonely, were like they made little minion creatures to serve them. And that's the draken.
Mhm.
Um, Uh, what else? What else was kicking around? The
So, all
elves
right,
were one of the nature
go ahead.
was the old god of nature. Um,
So, if the god of magic made the god of dragons, and the god of dragons made the draken, which are like dragon humans, are they the only creatures who have magic?
they are the best creatures with magic. So there's a sort of a mythological like explanation for magic in the world that
Mm,
may or may not be true. But basically, the tale goes that at the beginning of creation, all the races went to the god of magic to get magic, and they traded something for magic, right? So it's like the centaur, you know, or allowed themselves to become more like primal essentially in exchange for wind magic, and the minotaur gave up self control to get rage magic, and so forth. Like every magical species gave up something to gain some form of magical mastery or ability.
mhm.
Um, except for humans. Humans refuse to give up anything, so magic hates them. Um,
So they can't use magic.
they can, but it's always difficult. It always fights with them. It's like wrestling with a tiger. Like you can get it to do what you want eventually, but you're probably going to get hurt in the process.
Mm,
And so humans generally use magic objects, as opposed to channeling magic directly, because they can the tax on the object is going to be on the object, not on them. So magic users tend to use wands, staves, swords, items. They very rarely pull magic through themselves and out into the world, because it rebels at being used by humanity. Um, Whereas the other races can use magic, but it's generally limited to their specific form of magic. So, like, unless they do something else, like Yurk has the magic of a Minotaur, which allows him to funnel his rage into strength and healing. Whereas Al has the magic of Centaur, which allows her to manipulate air and the wind for various effects, um, mostly so that, how do I put this? Mostly it lets her breathe better, so she doesn't so she has greater stamina.
mm,
But because
that's
she's not,
useful.
yeah, she's not like a magic user, she just knows how to do a few things, right? But like centaur magic lets them like communicate over vast distances by having the wind carry their words, and at the higher levels they can like summon gusts of wind to do things like put out fires or disperse fog and smoke and things like that. Um, yeah, and things of that nature. And then you can get divine magic by bending to a god, and that will work fine because it's being given to you directly by that deity. Um, so clerics um, have are able to manipulate are you able to use magic without any difficulty, because the price they pay is service. And then if they don't perform the service, they lose their magic. So it's like, yeah, if you don't do what I say, the magic goes away. That's the bargain for priests and people like that. um,
Not a bad deal.
yeah, as long as it's a deity that whose desires align with yours.
True.
um,
Very true.
like if you if you serve justice, if you're like a a cop or a judge and you worship the god of justice and get his magic, it's probably a really good deal for you. But
Yeah.
probably not going to ask you to do anything really crazy. But if you're trying to get power from the god of assassins and murder, you might have to do some shady shit to retain your power, and that might be very dangerous for you. Um,
Well, if you're going to that god in the first place, you're probably already doing some shady stuff.
Yeah, yeah. It's like,
you,
well,
you
I really want to
you don't.
kill my father, the king, without getting caught. So I'll pray to the god of assassins, which like is also the god of
Yeah.
humanity. So like, some people can be like, I can't believe you worship this god. It's the god of me. It's the god that made my species. Of course I worship this god. Yeah, they've done some, shady shit in the past, but they're also the god of kings and rulers and industry, right? I just worship him because I want my factories to work well. Yeah, totally. That's why you worship the guy.
So I'm guessing that the Al and Urk and some of the non-human species are not all that just unhappy about not being human.
Yeah,
It
right.
sounds like they got a better deal in the
It's like,
in
oh,
when
you're
the
like
deities were dealt out.
exactly like, yo, you were made by the god of monsters, and you're made by the god of assassins. Like, which of us is actually worse here?
Right? Does that mean that like many don't trust humans because they were made by the god of assassins and murder
Yeah,
and all
yeah.
that?
There's like everybody gets sort of a bad deal from their deity, except for like gnomes. I think gnomes are cool. But it's just like, oh, god of nature and travel. Okay, like their bad stereotype is that they run away. Like of all the stereotypes to have, it's like, well, the centaur have the stereotype, the minotaur have the centaur have the
But
stereotype of
they're
like
small. Like,
murdering things, and humans have the stereotype of being backstabbers, and gnomes have the stereotype of leaving.
but if they're small, like I would think that that would make sense. Them
Hmm.
running away.
Yeah, like they're good at hiding in natural spaces and things like that, and also they're possessed of a wanderlust because they're the god of nature is also the god of travel, so they're the ones most lucky to like be
Well, that's
nomadic
why they leave.
sailors. Yeah,
Their
exactly,
god is the god of travel. They're just doing what they were created to do,
exactly.
traveling. That's
So on
pretty
the scale
wild.
of on the scale of stereotypes, you know, unlikely to stay put for 5 years isn't really is really low on the scale.
Mm, I would say so. That's pretty wild. This is sounding very D&D like. Did
It
that
definitely has some D&D overtones. I
do you
write
roll
these
the dice
stories. I
and
should.
see
I
what the
should.
Alan Urker are doing?
Hmm. I do take some inspiration from those from that in a way of like what kind of adventures I'll put them on. Like that's why I don't really call my stories epic fantasy. It's not like Lord of the Rings. It's more like Drizzt. It's like we've got
It's
some fantastic
episodic.
creatures going on fantastic adventures. Exactly, fantastic creatures going on fantastic adventures to fantastic places, and gives me an excuse to show off all the weird stuff in the world, and to introduce cool characters, and to just have really interesting set pieces um, to explore and fight in and all this stuff. And I really enjoy just like like Al fighting orcs in the fog, right? Stuff like that. Um,
That
you
was
know,
pretty cool.
and yeah, so that's mystical monsters on mystical adventures in a mystical land. That's uh, that's what you come to Shattered Skies for. Um,
That's the series title.
yeah, that's the setting. I call it the Shattered Sky setting because the moon was shattered. Um,
So there's no justice?
oh, there's justice. It's just wounded justice. Um, the god of justice has been injured by a great injustice, but he's still there. Um, in fact, one of his monikers is the wounded god because because the moon was damaged. Um,
Who broke the moon?
um, how do I put this? A long, 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 long time ago, um,
Although,
basically like
go on.
demons attacked the world, and they lost. And while they were losing, they struck out at the planet and and shattered the moon. Not entirely, but mostly.
They left a
Um,
big crater.
it left a massive crater. The moon is like cracked. It's like kind of like spreading into an asteroid belt, basically, and large chunks of the moon fell to the planet, and it ravaged the continent that the stories take place in. Um, it ravaged the continent such that it created a giant basin in the center of the continent, causing it to flood, and that's called the lunar sea, um, because of the moon rocks that fell and caused it. So in the middle of the continent is this giant churning ocean, this giant churning sea, and and mountain peaks, which have become islands because there was a mountain chain like running through the middle of the continent before this happened.
Oh wow.
Um, yeah, so basically demons fucked up the moon,
Where'd
and
they come from, the demons, and who
oh,
created them?
that's a deep secret. It's like that's 17 books away deep lore stuff. Um, which also ties to like four of my other settings because they all take place in the same universe. So like a lot of these monsters and gods and such appear in some of my other settings because it's the same,
Is
basically the
there
same galaxy.
is
Um,
there like a name for this greater um galaxy that encompasses all your settings?
I
Or
haven't
is
come
it
up
the
with a name for
Steven
the
verse?
exactly. I haven't come up with a name for the galaxy yet. Um, but I did come up with a name for the demons, basically for the far off invaders. They're basically called. I think it called named them like something like Zendrick, and essentially any monster with a Z as its um, starting name came with the demons, or is because of
Ooh.
the demons. So they poison certain areas. They released monsters, which have become part of the environment and transform the environment. They're essentially like terraforming the world, or trying to, before they're driven off. And you see some of that in the second story. You meet some of what uh what they left behind when they were driven off thousands and thousands of years ago. But that calamity is responsible for the state of the world. Like there used to be a massive human nation that spanned the entire continent, but when the sky fell and gutted the continent, they destroyed the center of their nation. Um, and caused everything to fracture into these small hamlets and small and city states and nations and so on and so forth. So like the world, the continent is sort of in a sort of a rebuilding, rediscovery phase after the calamity, after Skyfall. Um,
Wow. And that's 17 books away. So we talking. So when is that gonna be out
uh,
where someone can read it?
2052.
2052.
uh,
We should still be alive then.
yeah, yeah, I know. It's what, 30 something years away. That's fine. I'm not that old yet. Um, yeah, yeah.
I was just thinking, I was like, wait, I don't actually know if you're older than younger or younger than me. We never ever talked about that. It was just never a thing.
hmm I
I could, I could probably figure it out because you're my cousin's friend, but
hmm
also I know how
Well,
old he
well,
is and how
one
old
of
I
us
am.
has 3 months on the other. I can't remember which way it swings.
I'm not gonna do the math. Although I could go to face. No, or did you do the Facebook thing where you said you're 100 years old and now it says you're 110? Like,
Can't remember what I put on Facebook. I know I lied.
uh, for a while, everybody like way back when Facebook first started up, a lot of people used to like this is I don't know if like men did it, but a lot of women lied and put they were 100 years old.
hmm
I had many friends who did that. and it just kept adding a year on top of
Exactly.
it.
So like, congrats, you're 172 now. So you're
Yeah, no,
not
I
dead.
didn't think to do that, and like now you like I don't think you can anymore. You used to be an
Yeah,
editable
because they
field you could
they
put
try
in.
to verify everything.
Mhm. So I think it has my exact age. Not that I care.
Same.
Mhm.
Like my information has been out there so long that like whatever.
Yeah. Doesn't help with advertising though. I get like all the way. I was like, dude, yeah, I'm a woman in the early 40s, but I don't have kids.
Mm,
They're wasting
I don't want
money
this.
showing me kid stuff. If I need something from my nephew, I will ask him what he wants. He's old enough
Mm-hmm.
to tell me.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly.
I just find that hilarious. Because I'm a woman of a certain age, I get all the ads, and like none of them have anything to do with anything that I would ever buy.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Like my ads are like 50-50. Like
Mm,
some stuff I'm like, oh yeah, I could definitely like this. And then some stuff is like, this is completely not even remotely relevant to my life or my lifestyle or whatever. It's like, hey, do you need solar panels on your second house in
yes.
the Bahamas? I'm like, I
If you live in,
none of that
yeah,
applies to me. I don't.
yes. The best is like you go on to check the weather on like the Weather Channel, and they're like, New York. I think lately it's Pennsylvania. Governor is paying for solar panels for how zip codes in Pennsylvania. I was like, that's great, but I don't live in Pennsylvania.
Exactly. Exactly.
Which
I don't know why I'm getting this.
that's
Like,
what I was trying to figure out. It was like, I'm a kind of a drive from Philly here.
mhm, just a wee bit. It's not even like you're like over the border where you're like, okay,
No.
like yeah, I get some stuff about 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 Jersey because Jersey's
Yes.
right there. Like fine, but like PA or like Connecticut's like no, bro, no, bro.
Yes, I get that too. And I'm like, wrong state. And I don't have a house. So
Hmm.
you can't, or the best is the spam phone calls about cleaning your chimney. Those are the
Hmm.
best. They runs right into the sales pitch and have to be like, I have an apartment. We don't have a chimney.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like, I'll be like shopping somewhere, like, what are like, let me ask you a question. What are you going to redo your windows? I'm like, they're not my windows. Like,
Whenever the
I rent those
association does
windows.
it.
When the landlord wants to redo the windows, you need to ask him. That's
Seriously. Uh, such fun. Such fun. All
good
right.
times.
So so how many books are we getting next year from you?
If things go well, um,
Which
think
we're gonna hope that they will. We're gonna put out
exactly,
that good energy into the world.
exactly. If things go well, the plan is release book 3 probably in Q2. I'd rather do Q1, but I doubt that I can get it done and edited for
Come on, the
Q1.
holidays are coming up.
Yeah, but
You
like
can you can
to finish it and
instead
edit
of
it
Netflix and
and
chilling,
get it
do
out there.
you know soundtrack and writing.
Exactly, absolutely. So probably Q2, hopefully like Q1 if things go very well. Um, get out the third book. Get out Apprentice to Dreams is the working title of the third book. Um, then a month or two later, combine all three books, all of the one, two, and three into an anthology, and release that with some short stories and some additional little doodads, so that anybody who bought the first three books still gets something worthwhile for getting the anthology. Then it would be released the episodes 4, 5, and 6 over the next 3 to 5 months, and release a second anthology of 4, 5, and 6, and then in December release a mega anthology of everything. Um,
December 2024.
yeah, if
Well, I
things
mean, I'm gonna buy all the things, so
if things go well,
just
and that would be an addition of trying to produce at least one other novel. Um, probably my urban fantasy novel. I don't know. It'd either be the urban fantasy novel or it'd be the Moby Dick in space novel. Um,
you have to come back here and talk about those. Those are so fun. I mean, this is fun too. They're all fun. He writes a lot of really
Oh yeah, I
fun
got so much.
stories.
I got the Moby Dick in space. I got the urban fantasy. I
But
got
there's
the
just so many
superhero
jokes
series.
we could go on with the
Um,
Moby Dick in space, which is why you have to come back with that one.
Absolutely,
When it's
absolutely.
ready, we can have. I that would be fun.
Yeah, it's turning out to be a lot of fun. Producing it. The writers group, really enjoys it. They're able to follow along with it very well because there's a lot of world building going on. So to make sure to pace out the exposition in a way where it's fun and not just like detailed diatribe that makes your
Hmm.
eyes roll in the back of your head. Um, that
I
is really
like
the problem
when
with anything.
Yeah, I like when the world gets in the way and then the character is forced to deal with it because that's always a fun way to deliver the world building is if the character's trying to do something and
Hmm.
some part of this world that you didn't realize was there is in the way,
It's like,
you know?
this thing broke. I have to do this thing. Why? Because of this very important detail. Um,
Yeah. Or like all the statues came alive. They've always been there in the way and you never knew why and now you
hmm
know why. They came alive. They're now a problem the character needs to solve. That's a
exactly.
one of mine coming
Yes.
up probably 2025.
Yeah, I remember that bit of lore
Yeah, they
from
just
way
won't let me
back
get
when
to
you
it.
tell me about your books.
I've been trying
Uh,
to get to it for 20 something books and they just won't let me. Let me write it, please.
hmm
they just they won't let me do the setup for it. It needs a little bit of setup. They just won't let me do it. I'm mad.
It's gonna be fantastic when you get there, though. I really look forward
I
to
hope
seeing it,
so.
seeing the the chaos that ensues.
I hope so, but like right now I have to save the universe from like I can't even go into it. It's too ridiculous. This otherwise I won't be able to do any more books if I'm trying to
Yeah,
save
there needs to be a
everything.
universe there for you to have books in.
Yeah, they're destroying the entire timeline and the entire world, and I am trying to stop them, but I don't know how to stop them. this they did things that were not in the outline, and I don't know.
hmm
Well, I don't have a solution yet. I have one more book to figure out how to fix this because this is not going beyond a trilogy. I will not let
hmm
it.
No, I know that problem. Like, oh, you're off script. You
That's
gotta
me every book.
lash it with words and drag them back onto the plot. Drag them back to the plot.
Yeah, and sometimes they do things that are so cool. You're like, I know you're supposed to kill your darlings, but this is just so
Hmm
cool. It
We
is
gotta keep this
so
in. This is just way too awesome.
yes, and then it's thrown everything so far off track that you're like, okay, how do we get from here to where we're supposed to be way over here?
Hmm
Uh, yeah, it's a fun problem to solve. It's also a frustrating problem to solve,
hmm
but that's why we get paid the little bucks for. Every time someone buys
exactly.
a book. Every time you pay a book, you are paying an author back for all the stress and frustration and all the
hmm
arguments that they had with the characters
Exactly. You're
and
you're
making it
you're
all worth it.
you're making my gray hairs worth it.
Yes, and encouraging us to get back into the trenches and fight with those characters all over again for the next book.
Absolutely.
So, thank you, readers. That's cool.
No, we love
All
it.
right.
We-
So all right. So how far are you on the Moby Dick in space?
that one's only like 25% done, but
Okay.
it's a it's a quick.
Is it a
Well,
series or standalone?
it's a standalone. It's going to be. It's basically it's part of a space opera setting, and there's a series of connected, but not like books that will be connected but are not a series to help establish what the space opera setting is like. Um, and then there'll be series, at least one, probably two or three series set in the space opera setting. So it's like this is a foundational story, so
I
people
see.
can understand what the setting is like and can just like dip out if like it doesn't grab them, right? Like something's just here's a thing, it's set in the universe, understand what it's like, what the universe is about, how things operate, and lay down kind of the laws of the land. And it kind of lays down the laws of the land for me too, because like, all right, I need to figure out how all these things work. So writing it down and putting it together in a story helped me like solidify solidify things like how does fashion and light travel work? How does communication work? How does et cetera, et cetera. It's a space opera, so
Mhm.
these questions need to be answered.
Hand
Um,
wavium.
there's a little hand wavium, um, because the framing device of the Moby Dick and space story is of a news crew going on a spaceship. So like sometimes I'll ask a question and the person will like, do, do you have a degree in seventh dimensional quantum physics? And I'm like, no, then I can't explain it to you. Just trust me. A means B. And that's all I can tell you without you going to college and taking a 10-year course on quantum engineering to understand what the engines do.
Mhm. Yeah, that's wild. I don't write sci-fi because I would have to figure out exactly the physics behind it, and I just can't do that right now. So I'll
Mhm.
stick to fantasy where we can have
Yeah,
magic crystals
exactly.
and
Like,
where the hand wavium is totally expected and all part of the show.
yeah, I try to keep the near physics as true to what we understand of reality, and then the rest is like, this is plausible. At that point, it's like be consistent
Yeah.
is my goal. It's like, so if I
I mean,
say
string
it
theory
works like
is
this in book
yeah.
one, it always works like that, always. Um,
But like if you read anything about string theory, it's reads like science fiction.
hmm
And M theory, yeah, they both read kind of like, and there's the famous quote from, I think it was it Einstein? No, it's not Einstein, it was the other one.
was it Sagan?
I don't think it was Sagan. It was what's his name? He's still alive today. Where he said, we don't, God doesn't play dice with the universe. Basically, because that's what the string
hmm
theory is very much about, probabilities and like the Schrodinger's cat. We don't know if the
hmm
cat's alive or dead until we open the box,
Yeah.
and we don't know and going. It's we don't know the position of the electron until we look, and when we look, that's when the universe decides where it is. But we don't
hmm
know what it was doing before we looked. Yeah, that's kind of a bit of that, and that's why it always seemed to me like it was science fiction.
hmm Yeah,
But
quantum probability. All
yeah,
probabilities are until one is discovered. Then there was only ever the one possibility. It's like
yes,
that's
it collapses
okay.
down all the
hmm
waveforms, which is pretty wild. Because and it goes and even light in quantum theory is, it's both a photon and a wave. So it
hmm
is a physical particle and also a wave, but you don't know which it is until you see it.
Yeah.
Until you study it. But it's existing in in both states almost, which is wild. Because
hmm
yeah, I'm sorry, I'm a big science nerd.
No, no. I
I read
same
a ton of
same.
these.
I don't listen to enough science audiobooks, but I do
I
make
could
sure
give
that
you
there's at
some
least one.
recommendations.
Oh no, I have a queue. I keep one in my
Yeah,
rotation, so it's like I'll listen to like a sci-fi and then a fantasy and then like a heart and then like a science textbook and then like a sci-fi and then a fantasy and then a science textbook,
there's
etc.
there's some physicists have their own books, and some of them are so well written, like you don't need to be, they're not written like textbooks, and they
Mhm.
take you through their theories, their findings, and some of them are like, just there's a couple of them that are really like brilliant,
Mhm.
and it's very easy reading. I could
Yeah, yeah.
recommend. And they're very enjoyable too, because they also talk about like them as a scientist and like studying it, and you get kind of a feel for like what it's like to be a scientist and kind of what your day to day is like, which is kind of neat because
Yeah.
like that's so
Like
far
they're
removed
people and
from my
it's like
reality,
mhm. And it's like it's a kind of it's a part of the like people don't really think about them like that. Like people like,
Yes,
as just a dude who likes a burger sometimes. And
that they have arguments about with other physicists about how things work, about whether their theory is right or wrong, or how to prove things, and that's
mhm.
all really fascinating because we don't always get to hear about it.
Yeah. Like we hear like, the consensus generally, but like, how did the consensus get reached and how big a consensus is that and
Yes,
how well thought out is the counter argument, right? Like is it like, oh, this doesn't make any sense, or is it like, oh, it really does make a lot of sense if it goes the other way, but like we don't have enough
those
proof going the opposite direction,
right.
etc.
And that's one of my favorite. physics books is like that. He talks about he was very much against this particular theory of string theory. No way could this sounds like science fiction. No way could it be real. And through the course of the book and in researching it and arguing with other physicists who believe it, and actually looking into the data and stuff, they completely changed their mind and ended up
Hmm.
proving that this could actually be right. And it was a really interesting. There wasn't any math or any equations or anything in it. It was a very cool book.
Hmm.
You know.
And that's like the best part about scientists as a people is that, like, that willingness to be wrong, to go, oh,
Yes.
I was wrong, and change their mind based on information. Um, that's what allows them to find all the answers.
Yeah. And there was a fun book about a bet between two physicists who that it this is going back to that whole I can't think of his name. It's not Carl Sagan. It's he's in the wheelchair. I can't think of his name. I can
Hawking.
picture him. Yes, I can picture him, but I me and names, man.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that they had a bet with I think it was Hawking about about something with black holes and things, and the
Hmm.
whole book was about that bet, how it came about, why it came about, what was the thing that they were in conflict over, and they went off like this is like normal people. You have a bet or something, you do the thing and the bet is called and that's it. They went off
Hmm.
and they're trying to prove it, and it ended up being like this it almost like a little bit of an adventure. It was a really I really enjoyed that book a lot.
Sounds fantastic.
Just
You're gonna have to send me the name so I can
I
track it
gotta
down.
Yeah, I gotta dig it out. It was on Audible. It was very well narrated. He has a whole bunch of books that he's done. I know which author it was. I can't think of his name, but I can picture the book. Can't picture the title.
And I just
I
gotta
can
dig
picture the
through your
cover.
massive library to find it.
Yeah, just like the Audible now, you can it's there's a you can sort by like genre. So just go to science and just scroll through.
Oh, there you go.
I remember I know who it is. I just can't think of his name. Um, I'll send you the. It was just kind of neat, seeing that they do these that they bet on certain things and because they were disagreeing and they're like, well, let's have a bet and let's see who can prove it or who can and then they
Hmm.
went off to do that and
Hmm.
and it was just kind of fun that it and it ended up proving and there was some great scientific study that came out of a bet because they couldn't agree on
Fantastic.
something it's just you don't think of science coming about that way
Hmm.
and it's just kind of fun. um, I don't know,
Just
I'm
humans being
nerdy and find it
humans.
fun. Yes, they are human beings, can confirm, have read many of their books. um Scientists are people too. We got off topic somewhere. Oh, we were talking about your space opera thing, and that's what triggered all of this.
Hmm.
So we've got Moby Dick in space, and then we have, and that's maybe coming next year. I'm hearing.
Maybe I'm going to try to do either Moby Dick in space or my urban fantasy story, preferably both. But I'm going to set myself a realistic expectation of one novel, and if I get two novels done, it'll be fantastic. Um,
How far are you on the urban fantasy one?
about the same way. That's why I have them both at the same level. They're both like 20 to 30% done. Um, they're just very different kinds of stories.
So you're
Uh,
switching back and forth when you're
yeah,
sitting down
yeah.
to write.
And see where the muse takes me that day. Um, yes.
Yeah, you have to be
Alright.
faithful to one whip to get it done.
Sometimes, sometimes like I'll work on another one, and then like it'll basically letting the other one, like I'll work on A, and because I'm working on A, B will percolate, and then like the next day I'll be energized for B, and then I'll work on B, and then that'll energize C, and I'll work on C the next day, and then that energizes A, and the next day go back to A.
Is
Um,
there a point where you've written so much on one where you're like, okay, I'm just going to concentrate on this one right now and force the
yeah,
muse
like
to
if
do their thing because we need to get this done and
yeah,
the end is in sight.
Yeah, when I come to the home stretch, or I hit like a really like juicy part of the story, or a very confusing part. Like sometimes, like I'll be like, okay, this isn't making sense to me, and I'm putting it down. So I need to refigure this into something that's sensible before I can walk away from it. So if I come back to this if I come back to this in a week, I'll be too confused to know what I was doing. Um, but yeah, generally when I get somewhere past the 80% mark, it becomes all in on just that one specific job work.
Are you doing National Novel Writers Month, or NaNoWriMo as the hashtag that's everywhere at the moment? Which, for people
No.
who don't know, NaNoWriMo is you write 50,000 words from November 1st to November 30th, which, and I don't remember. I think it's the science fiction, fantasy science fiction writers of America put out that a novel is at least 40,000 words. So if you have a
Hmm.
50,000 word story, it's 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 a short novel. Usually epic fantasy, which I write and which Stephen writes, is generally closer to the 100,000. It's usually
Hmm.
like the 100,000 and plus territory. So 50,000 is half the book for us.
Yeah.
Depending on we every once in a while, like, the characters will do something that's a little more straightforward without quite so many twists and turns, and we can
Hmm.
get the book finished in 40 or 50,000 words. It does happen. I have proof.
Yeah, I generally consider
um,
anything under 40,000 a short story. Um,
It's a novella. Any under 40,000 would be a novella, and then I think novelette is somewhere around the like 17 to 20,000. Don't quote me on that.
mm,
And short story is like under like 10,000,
10.
I think. Something there's a whole, if you Google it, like there's a there's different word counts for different things. And I mean, I mostly just write stuff that's like
Just
100,000,
I
like
just
80
write
to
until it's
100,000
done.
words, or more, because some stories and
Some
some
stories
stories need
grow.
more. These might need more. They're just driving me
Hmm.
nuts. There's too many main characters in there, and they won't let me get rid of any of them. It just
Hmm.
keep adding. Doesn't help. Anyways, so yeah, so you're not doing NaNoWriMo for
No, no,
2023.
I'm like beginning of November was just way too busy to sit down and write. I am writing, but I'm not gonna like be working on like a because you're supposed to work on like a fresh project for Nano
No,
theoretically,
I
or
heard
like
that you can finish a project, or you can, like, if you've already written a book and published it, which you have. I think, like, the way that you should do Nano is just write 50 words. It
mm,
doesn't have to be all in the same whip. Like, there's authors who are writing multiple projects. I'm using it to finish a book. So I don't write every day. I work full time, and I have
mm-hmm.
to commute 3 days a week to the office. And those 3 days, I get home so late, and I'm just like,
Yeah, no, seriously, same.
just
Most
like
days
done
I'm getting home somewhere
mentally.
around 7. Then between like showering, cooking, eating, I get like an hour or an hour and a half personal time before I have to go to bed since I get up at 5 in the morning.
Yeah.
So like trying to clock 50,000 words by the end of November, unlikely. But I'm working, I am writing, I am trying to um, get Apprentice to Dreams completed so it can go out next year,
Mhm.
and and hopefully maybe get uh, Moby Dick in Space or my paranormal story out as well.
But
Um,
I just want to correct what you said, because you don't. NaNoWriMo is basically for new writers to build a writing habit, but you don't have to write every day to get 50,000 words.
no,
I don't
absolutely
write. I am doing NaNoWriMo, and I have so far clocked 18,000 words. I
nice.
don't write. I write 4 days a week. I write
Hmm.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, because those tend to be the days I'm either working
No,
from home,
those are the
or
days when you
I have
can.
I have I have a little, I have time. And I have written, I'm a little bit, I think I'm like, right, yesterday I was a little over the count that you needed for NaNoWriMo. Today I didn't write anything yet today, because we're doing the interview. Today
Hmm.
is November 11th, but I am going to be writing later today, and that was just 7 chapters, got me 18,000 words.
Nice.
So you don't have, you can still do nano, and you don't have, if you can't write every day, it doesn't matter. Yesterday I wrote 3,500 words because the characters had a lot they were trying to do.
Because you were able to. It
It
pulled you
took a few
in, and
hours, but
yeah.
yeah, there was just a lot of it was just, there was a specific point in the story that they needed to reach that they've been like really trying hard to avoid.
Hmm.
And yesterday was the, we are going to make you do this thing
You're
that we,
reaching this plot point come hell or high water.
I can even tell you what the plot point is because it's the freaking subtitle of the book. Like
Hmm.
they're supposed to summon the gods, and I was not letting this chapter end until they freaking summoned the gods. I mean, it just took 3,500 words to do that because the characters really didn't want to participate in that. But you know what? They don't always get a choice in the
Exactly.
matter, and we summoned them. Well, not all of them, but you know, I can't. I got to pick my battles.
Hmm. Exactly.
So
No, I understand. Totally understand.
but yeah, so I just want to put that out there because there's a lot of talk about like NaNoWriMo, but you don't have to write every day if you can't.
No,
You can
it's
write
it's
4
try to
days a
get as
week and
much.
still meet the 50K.
Yeah, try to get as much done as you can. Figure out what pacing is going to work for you, whether it's an hour a day or 10 hours a week, wherever you find it, or what
Mhm.
have you. And like whether or not you succeed at the 50K isn't important. The important part is putting in the effort and getting the work done at
And
all.
building the habit.
Building the habit so that
Yeah.
you realize that like it's for a lot of people just starting the habit is terrifying, and
Mhm.
it's like they don't feel like they could ever, right? So just
Right.
doing it lets you tell yourself like, yes, I can do this. This is something that's possible for me.
Right.
And then maybe you do, and maybe you get published, and maybe you become whatever. And even if all you do is produce one book, that's still more than 99.9% of people who say they want to be a writer, right? So
Yeah. And you
anything
don't
you
have
do
to
is
publish it.
worthwhile. Hmm.
There's a lot of people who do NaNoWriMo for a variety of different reasons. Is you don't have to be an author and you don't have to publish it. You could just do it because you want to see, can you write a
Hmm.
50,000 word story? You could do it because you want to write a story for your kids or your best friend or your family. Like there's a lot of, not everybody who is doing NaNoWriMo is writing a book to publish it at some point. You could just write it for the fun
Hmm.
of it.
Hmm.
There is a whole website and a community with that. I didn't participate in that because I didn't feel like it was fair, because I do write 4 chapters a week and average about 40 to 50,000 words a month and have been doing that for years. So I
Hmm.
was like, I'm not gonna go in sign up for the site and do all, participate in this thing and probably win the thing for something that I'm doing every month anyways. Like this is just a regular month for me. Like I'm not doing anything different than I would have been doing if it was not Nano. So NaNoWriMo. So I didn't join that, but there is a whole website with forums and community and aspect if you need that. Like that's what it's there for. Like totally use that. I don't want to be controversial, but I don't think that authors, I see authors who do it, who sign up for that and participate in that, who write books all month long, all year long. And I'm like, why are you participating in something you do all the time anyways? So I'm just posting about it on social media. But that's, I don't want to be controversial, but like I'm like, if you do this all the time, then you participating in this is not like a genuine thing. I don't know. I'm being controversial. Sorry.
How dare
I'm
you?
bashing my fellow authors who write multiple books per year. Um, Starting a bit of controversy there.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So go. Yeah. So that's NaNoWriMo. We got off track again.
At
See, it's
least you're
often
talking
too.
writing.
Um, what else did? Okay, so we talked about what's coming next, what you're writing now, when to expect it. Um, and you're welcome to come back and talk
Of
about
course.
these.
I look
Use
forward
that as
to it.
incentive when you're like, I
Hmm.
don't feel like writing, but you've now promised to come back and talk about these.
Yeah,
You're leaving
to talk about
listeners.
the other works, and when things get get going, so that so I have to produce something so that I have more stuff to talk about when I come back.
Yeah, so we can be like, well, when can we read this? Well, you can read it on X day because it's on pre-order or whatever.
Exactly.
awesome.
No, absolutely.
Is there
You come
anything
back
else
to
you want
give
to?
more.
Yes. Is there anything else you want to say about a meeting of monsters, or anything else that we have talked about?
Just it Larg. You can get a Meeting of Monsters off of Amazon as an ebook. If you like adventure, if you like monsters, if you like combat and action in the fantasy setting, if you like a little bit of romance and people and characters that genuinely care for each other, then you will love A Meeting of Monsters. It is a fun time in an interesting universe with a lot going on. And if you love that, you'll love everything else I have to offer.
Which we hope you will love and check out. You gonna have paperbacks at some point, so I get a signed
Once I
copy?
like, I will do paperbacks of the anthologies. I
Okay,
just
that's what I thought.
as a personal metric, I feel like anything less than 60,000 words should not be in print. I feel like I'd be stealing money from people if I made them pay for a 30,000 word story on a paperback. So once I get the anthologies out, um, and the other novels, novellas, and so on and so forth, those will have paperbacks as well. And in time, God willing, hardbacks.
They're a little more complicated
Oh
hardbacks
yeah.
as someone who's recently figured out how to do all that,
Hmm.
and a bit expensive.
Hmm.
Since the one of the only printers that you can do print on demand from, it's only their UK facility that can do hardbacks right now. So it's
Yeah, that's going to be a while for me. I'm not trying to run to the finish line.
right.
Got to get some
And
third book out, get some paperbacks out, get some novels out, and keep trying to keep entertaining people and sharing my stories and my vision with them.
oh, that is awesome. This has been fantastic, and Steven's going to come back and tell us all about Moby Dick in space, his urban fantasy, and what Al and Urk get up to next, sometime next year. So definitely follow um, this follow or like or whatever so that you'll be notified of when that happens. And this has been another episode of Fantasy Lore and More. I've been your host, Melinda Kucsera, and we've had Stephen and Wallace on here to talk about A Meeting of Monsters and many, 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 many other things. Thank you so much. Have a great day or a great night wherever you are. And we'll see you in the next broadcast with another fantasy author and another fantasy book.